Oh, good. Thank you. All right. Welcome to the Senior Concerns Seminar Series. As I said, I'm Martha Shapiro. I'm the Director of Programs at Senior Concerns. For those of you who might not be familiar with our programs, that includes our Meals on Wheels, our Adult Daycare Program, our Caregiver Resource Center, our Senior Advocacy Services, and of course, our educational seminars, which you are here for today. So we will go ahead and get started. Our topic today is responding to dementia-related behaviors. And we have a wonderful speaker today who has so much experience in the field, and I think we're all going to find something valuable from this today, including myself. So I'm happy to introduce Mark Stelzer in collaboration with the California Central Coast chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. He is an Alzheimer's and dementia expert known for consulting, educating, and supporting healthcare professionals, caregivers, and family members. Mark's commitment and energy for promoting the benefits of person-centered care can be traced back to his personal experience as a caregiver for a family member and his graduate school internship, where he spent significant time working in a geriatric psychiatric unit. His professional experience includes working in elder care as a respected director of dementia and memory care programs, a hospice medical social worker, and a dementia care consultant. In addition, he's an Alzheimer's Association volunteer and dementia trainer for assisted living and skilled nursing facilities. With over 20 years of experience and dedication, Mark is proud to share his vast knowledge and insight, and we are so fortunate to have him today. Thank you. That if you'd like.
Okay. Just like this?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. I first off want to thank Senior Concerns for asking me to speak today, and I want to congratulate them on 50 years of incredible commitment and education to our community. I'd like to thank the Alzheimer's Association for all they do for our families. And most importantly, I'd like to thank you. It's very important to have education in working with folks that have dementia. And you have shown commitment by showing up. And I hope that I can provide you with things that you can use for your loved ones, sharing with people. But I think it's also important to start off with a little bit of education about dementia and what's happening for people as we deal with the behaviors that we see on a day-to-day basis. So the definition of dementia, I'm going to read it here, says dementia is a general term which describes a category of symptoms such as loss of memory, language, judgment, complex motor skills, and other intellectual function caused by either a reversible condition or by the irreversible damage or death of the brain's neurons or nerve cells. And I want to really talk about that reversible dementia. A lot of people come in, we're talking about a progressive disease, but there are reversible dementias. If you've ever had a urinary tract infection, it can cause a lot of confusion, even for somebody that doesn't have Alzheimer's or a significant medical condition. But that infection, once it's treated with an antibiotic, goes away. Therefore, it's a reversible dementia. Somebody who has drug interactions can have a confusion, but once they regulate the medications, that can go away. Stress, that can cause somebody to have a dementia, a memory dysfunction. But the vast majority of people experience those progressive diseases, like the Alzheimer's, like Lewy body dementias, any of the other ones. The process of storing memory begins in an area of the brain called the hippocampus. And the hippocampus is a device that's charged with the responsibility of taking new information and transferring it to what is called long-term memory. So it's important for people to be able to have a working hippocampus in order to remember things. So if you want an example of long-term memory, if you ask me, what's the address of the house that I grew up in when I was a child? 527 Echo Court, San Bernardino, California, 92404. Telephone number 8823905. Back then, my hippocampus worked fine, and that information was able to get transferred. But it's for folks that have a damaged hippocampus, it can be dangerous. They don't remember that they put a kettle on the stove and they walk away. They go outside, they become confused, they can't find their way back. So it's very important to know what's going on. This is brain dysfunction. As the dementia, as the progressive disease takes hold, what it's doing is it's damaging and eating away brain cells. The brain is made up of all of these cells that connect with each other. And there's a protein, beta amyloid, tau is another one, that is gunking up the brain. You may have heard the term plaques and tangles. So we understand that it starts in the hippocampus, but then it travels to the frontal lobe. And the frontal lobe has very specific functions. And the reason that I bring this up is that understanding what's going on helps you to be able to manage behaviors because you know what's happening. So with the brain in the frontal lobe, the voluntary movement is controlled by the frontal lobe. You'll have people that display that Alzheimer's shuffle. You'll see kind of a shuffle. They have difficulty moving. It also affects emotions. You can have people that cry all the time. Why are you crying? I don't know. I can't help it. It's a function of the brain being damaged. It affects emotions. It affects thinking. Well, we do everything in the process of thinking. And as an example, I'll give you the activity of brushing your teeth. Think about all of the steps that it takes. So for me, I have to go in the bathroom, turn on the light. I have to open the drawer and take out the toothpaste. I have to take the cap off. I have to reach into the cup and take out my toothbrush, put the toothpaste on, bring it to my mouth, brush my teeth. All of those steps require the ability to think. And if you're not able to think clearly, then you're not able to do things in a complete step. It also affects personality. And personality is the big one that we deal with. I always tell the story about these daughters that used to come and visit at the assisted living, the memory care area that I ran. And they would walk in and all of my caregivers would walk up and say, "We love your mother. She is our favorite." One day the daughters cornered me in my office and said, "You need to tell your caregivers to quit telling us how wonderful our mother is. Our mother was a mean, nasty person." It's like, whoa. I've also had situations where my caregivers come up to me and they say, "Mary is saying the most horrible things to me. She's cussing at me." And I have a conversation with the daughter, and the daughter says, "That's not my mother. Where did my mother go? She was the sweetest person in the world." So what I learned is that there are nasty people who become sweet. There are sweet people that become nasty. There are nasty people that stay nasty, and there are sweet people that stay sweet. And when I'm consulting with families, one of the things that I have to share with people is nobody gets to pick and choose the symptoms that this disease presents. And when I'm talking with my caregivers who are taking it personally, that this is happening to them, I have to help them to understand that this is a symptom of a disease. We wouldn't tease a person who had COPD and had difficulty breathing. We would be, this is the disease. And all the other diseases that people have, cancers, all of these things. But Alzheimer's and the dementias are a hard one because it's covered up with hair and a scalp and it's under there and they look the same and it's not. So it's really important to have that understanding. So before we start, I want to share with you some important points. Behaviors are an expression of an unmet need. Very important to understand that. And as we gravitate through here, it'll make more sense to you. Another important thing is anticipate problems before they happen. And as we go through here and you're developing a strategy, you'll see that. It's important to avoid the caregiver effect when you're working with somebody and you're trying to help them. Are you in a rush? Are your directions clear? Are you being too particular? Are your actions causing unnecessary stress to the individual in your care? A lot of times, it's us. I'd like to read to you before we start a quote that I discovered years ago, early in my career, and it's guided me in working with families, working with people that have dementia. And it's from a book called The Loss of Self. And it says, individuals with Alzheimer's disease are not able to change the way they feel. They are not able to stop being fearful, confused, depressed, and angry from time to time. They do not know why they are experiencing these feelings, and they do not know how to feel better. And with that, it's an understanding that we are the best medicine. The environment is the best medicine. And as we go through here, I'll bring up points and then I'll share more information. So we're going to go ahead and start with responding to dementia-related behaviors. And this is part of a series that the Alzheimer's Association offers, and this is the responding to dementia-related behaviors. So the learning objectives. After this presentation, you'll be able to describe how dementia can cause changes in a person's behavior, list possible triggers for dementia-related behaviors, compare non-medical versus medical ways to address behaviors, explain the four-step approach for managing behaviors. Once again, responding to dementia-related behaviors. Understanding behavior changes. What is dementia-related behaviors? It's like an alarm telling you a need is not being met. Examples include feeling unsafe and uncomfortable. Behaviors are not always the same. The person may have good and bad days. The person living with dementia cannot control their behaviors. The Alzheimer's Association says if you've met one person with Alzheimer's, you've met one person with Alzheimer's. And it's not cookie cutter. So managing 20 plus individuals in a resident community, what would work with one would not work with another. The disease causes brain cells to break down. We talked about the degeneration, and where it starts at the hippocampus and how it migrates. These changes in the brain make it harder for the person to understand the world around them. The person may have trouble knowing what's real, what's safe, and what is right, what is the right thing for them to do. So let's hear from an expert. Thank you. Is this loud enough?
Now, these changes aren't consistent over time, but they can vary day by day, and then it can also vary as the disease progresses.
Individuals living with dementia can have trouble understanding the world around them. And unfortunately, that can lead to them not knowing what's real, what's safe, or what's appropriate. That uncertainty then sometimes leads to dementia-related behaviors.
Behaviors are a form of communication, just like I was saying.
All right.
Sorry.
Behaviors are a form of communication. People living with dementia react to what they think, feel, or need from the people in the world around them. These reactions are a form of communication. Caregivers must connect with the person to figure out what they are trying to tell you with their behaviors. These behaviors are not related to the person's true feelings about you or other people. Try not to take them personally. So we're going to go through anxiety and agitation. The person may show feelings of restlessness.
Experience some degree of suspicion. And this is a rather long and involved story, but my name is Freddie James. My father's name was Fred James. And shortly after he died, my mother accused me actually of stealing some money, of going to the bank and actually using my father's name and my name, the similarity, to take some money, which absolutely had not happened, but this suspicion had developed in her mind. Um, it took a lot of patience. It took a lot of explaining, but eventually it just took letting the situation die down, not getting too involved in it myself. In other words, not reacting in anger, not reacting with a lot of emotion, but just allowing her to work through the process.
I used to have residents that would come out of their room and they would start yelling, "Somebody came into my room and took $500. And we all knew that they didn't have $500 in their purse. Their family had taken the money and things. But what I was educated on is using a technique called validation theory. And what I mean by that is the same scenario. The woman would come out, "Somebody stole my money." And we would say, "Oh my gosh, that's horrible. Why would somebody do something like that to you? You're such a nice person." I'll tell you what, we're going to get to the bottom of this. Do you want me to call the police? Should we call the police? And what I was doing was redirecting the individual. They felt heard. They didn't have a situation where people were poo-pooing them, telling them, "What are you talking about?" and arguing. And in those kind of scenarios, less is more. So it's validating, and that can apply to anything that an individual says who has dementia. They just want to be heard. Behaviors are an expression of an unmet need. So wandering only happens in the early stages of the disease. What would you think?
False.
False? Very good. Wandering can happen at any stage of the disease. In fact, 6 in 10 individuals with Alzheimer's will wander at some point. And wandering is an interesting thing. There are people that sundown and they're wandering because they're looking for something that they feel that they have to do. A real dramatic experience early in my career in the Lock Gero Psych was a woman, and you could set your watch to it. At 3:30, she would go up in the day room, little lady. A little lady would walk up to the door and start banging on the door. I gotta get out of here. I gotta get out of here. My kids are coming home from school. And the nurses, because this was the medical model, would walk up to her, there, put their arm around her, take her over to the sofa, sit her down, give her a medication, and 30 minutes later, she was sleeping. And this would happen every day. And I was exposed to what's called the social model. So one day, after watching all of this, I beat the nurse to the door, and they were watching me. So the same situation, the woman started yelling, I gotta get home, I gotta get home. And I said, oh my gosh, that's horrible. I validated. She looked at me like, you're actually listening to me. And I said, I'll tell you what, we're gonna send somebody to your house and let your children in. And is it okay if we give them cookies or a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? And you can see like the wheels turn, and she stopped and she looked at me and I said, I love cookies. And she looked at me and I said, you know, they have great chocolate chip cookies here. Would you like to join me for chocolate chip cookies and a cup of coffee? And we walked away. And the nurses looked at me like I was crazy, like I was from another planet. But that's the social model. That's having a plan. That's recognizing what is going on. That was anticipating the problem. Triggers for dementia-related behavior can be physical. This can be the result of pain, discomfort, or other unmet physical needs. It could be social. This can include being around people who stress and bother the person. The environment. This is when things happening around the person cause stress. It could be personal. These come from inside the person, such as feeling they may be experiencing something that they're experiencing. So I'm going to go back because I want to elaborate a little. The physical. You can have somebody who is hungry. They're sitting at the table and they're not eating. Sure. So they're not eating. And the family get angry. Come on, you have to eat. And the person is getting angry at them because they're getting angry. But what has really happened is that the person is having tooth pain and the person can't communicate like you and I, you know, my gums hurt. So what do? They don't eat. But the family thinks something is completely different. They want to help. They're pushing, but the person is responding physically. Social, when it says this can include being around people who are stressed to the other person. Well, I would have caregivers who were busy and they were in a rush and they would come in to the lunchroom. Maybe the resident was in a wheelchair and they would park the wheelchair next to somebody that they knew didn't get along with that person and they were an irritant. And that's just causing a problem. Or visitors. And they'll talk about it in this a little more. Having somebody who's visiting with children who overstimulate the individual and then they react. The environment, this is when things happening around can cause stress. It used to bother me so badly when caregivers would take someone that we knew was always cold, and they would put them in their wheelchair right underneath the air conditioning. And then this person who really could not bear weight would start to stand up, and all the caregivers would yell, "Mary, sit down, Mary." And then the other people in the residence would get stressed out because they were witnessing somebody getting yelled at. But all it was is she was cold, and she needed to get away from the cold. And she didn't recognize that she couldn't stand and bear weight. Personal, it's pretty self-explanatory. There's things that are going on for people. So non-medical approaches to dementia-related behavior is applying person-centered care, care within the context of a relationship, doing all the things like recognizing that the person doesn't like when the TV is too loud. A non-medical approach should always come first. That's me walking the woman away from the door rather than dosing her and her missing out on quality of life. It should focus on giving physical and emotional comfort. Physical things are very important. The example that I give is, everybody knows President Reagan had Alzheimer's disease. He lived up in the ranch, and he had anxiety, and he had agitation, and he liked to wander. So they used to take him outside, and one Secret Service agent used to drop a bunch of leaves, and he would be walking with the rake, and he'd be raking them up into a little pile, and then they would walk him forward, and the guy would throw more, and some other Secret Service would pick up all the leaves and give them back to the person. So they anticipated that problem. They put him into a physical activity. When I had my groups at shift change, which is usually 2:30, that's about when people started sundowning. We would do a physical activity. I would take this big group, everybody would be in a circle, and we would take a heavy duty balloon. And we would either take like one of those pool noodles and cut them into pieces, and everybody would bat the balloon. And it was a lot better for them to be batting a balloon than us. So that's a great time to be sing-alongs with people, dancing with people. Even if the person is sitting in a wheelchair, sitting in a chair, if you're just moving, there's that physical thing, going for a walk and doing physical things. It helps. Detect and connect, take care of physical needs, help with emotional needs, review and plan for the next time. It's anticipating behaviors. It is knowing that sundowning is a big, big trigger for the behaviors that we have to deal with. I used to have a basket full of the cutest baby clothing. I went to a thrift store. I got all this baby clothing. I put it in a laundry basket. And when this one woman would start to get agitated and she was restless, I'd walk up and say, "Mary, I'm so glad I found you. They're coming to pick up the baby's laundry. Would you do me a favor and help fold the laundry?" And I'd put her with this basket, and you'd see her pick up the frilly little baby dress and the little socks and the little overalls for little boys. And it redirected all of that anxiety for them. So having a plan and having activities, and it doesn't really matter. People can sit in a chair and do things. They don't always have to be mobile, but it is getting them involved, taking that energy, putting it into something. Detect and connect. Use what you know about the person to try to understand their needs and feelings. Join the person in their reality. It will help you understand what they are trying to express. Approach the person calmly, quietly, and with respect as you figure out the situation. Avoid correcting the person. So it's easy for me to sit here and tell you to do all of these things for the individual. But the investment in learning how to do things and the time that it takes to do it is for you. You're as important in this journey as the people that you're caring for. And I would tell my caregivers, it takes 45 minutes to bathe somebody. You can have a 45-minute fight, or you can have a 45-minute fun activity. So, like to give examples, there was one man that we couldn't get him to bathe. And I walked into his room and I looked around and I noticed that his wife had pictures on the wall of golf courses. And on his nightstand was a picture of all these men standing with their golf clubs proudly. It was some golf tournament. So, knowing what a person, knowing who they are, what we would do is we would walk in, turn the shower on, get all of their clothes ready, and then go out, come back in. Hi, Bill, how are you today? I just want to let you know you're going to play golf. And your tea time is at 2:30. So we talked about long-term memory. In his long-term memory, he still knew tea time. That's a golfer appointment. He still knew he was a golfer. Well, his wife made sure of that. And we would talk with him about golf. Get him undressed, get him in the shower, never stop talking about golf. Well, I had to get the caregivers to buy into that concept. But the person had fun. The person wasn't resistant. I had another lady, she refused to take a shower. It was a real war. So when I talked with the daughter, I said, what was your mom about? We're trying to get her to shower. We're trying to get her to do her hygiene. She goes, I really don't know, but my mother loved to go to the spa. So I said, I need you to bring me a white terry cloth robe. So when we would go in to give her her bath, it was her day, we would turn the water on the temperature that she liked. We had in my office lavender spray, give it a little spray. We had a CD player with new age music. We turned on the music. And I used to have those little tea lights that were battery operated because we couldn't have flames in the building. And we would walk in and we would say, Mary, it's spa day. And we never had a problem getting her to take a bath. She was cooperative because she was going to the spa. And I can tell you hundreds of other stories that people have told me or that we had to figure out for all these people. Approaching calmly is very, very important because a lot of times to reduce behavior, you're understanding that people may not understand what you're saying to them. I don't know, maybe you talk fast. Maybe they have hearing issues. But what they're really doing is they're reading your body language. And if you come in and you're tense and you are rushed, they're going to sense that. I used to have to tell my caregivers, be like an actor. If you've ever done live theater on stage, when you're off stage, you're out of character. You get yourself into character, then you walk on stage. And the character that you're playing is the greatest caregiver in the world. And you're doing it for yourself because it makes them feel better. When they're not able to understand and they're reading your body language, possibly incorrect, they're very egocentric. Everything is about them. And so what can happen is they think you're angry with them. So how do you react when somebody is angry? They're going to dig in and be angry too. And all of this technique needs to also be filtered through the dynamics of a relationship that we have with the people that we care for. So the example that I'll give of that was my grandmother and grandpa. And in the 70s, my grandfather was taking care of my grandmother. And I always heard that they fought like cats and dogs. And so the roles had switched. Now my grandfather was having to cook and the laundry and taking care of my grandmother. And she was experiencing dementia, and they would argue, and she was resistant. And I can always remember hearing my grandfather say, when my mother would ask, "How are things going?" my grandfather would yell, "She knows what she's doing. She's just trying to get back at me." And that filter really is something that we need to think about and work through and understand that it isn't about the individual anymore. Unfortunately, that gate has closed. You are making the commitment to be present. You're making the commitment to take your time and energy to make sure that they're well taken care of. And that's what I mean by you're doing it for yourself. So, you know, in the very end, you're able to look yourself in the mirror proudly. This is what I did. And hold your head up high, because caregiving is the hardest thing that we can do. Ask yourself these questions to identify the need behind the behavior. Who was there when the behavior took place? The example was the room was full of kids. The room was full of loud people. The TV was blaring with the news. The air conditioning was on. What was it? What happened just before or after the behavior began? When does the behavior usually happen? Where did the behavior happen? How did I react? You know, it's okay to make mistakes if you provide care for people. The reality is, unless you do harm, they don't remember. So if you're a golfer, you get a mulligan, you get a do-over. But it's important to remember, okay, that didn't work. I'm not going to do it again. Taking care of physical needs. Always start with looking for the needs connected to the medical issues or physical pain. To identify and address physical needs, check what may be causing discomfort. Maybe the person is wearing uncomfortable clothing or is hungry. Maybe there is too much activity in the room. So I had a resident that moved in to the memory care area, and she had been taken care of by her husband. And it was obviously a difficult situation. So she moved in around caregivers that were trained to work with people that have dementia. They were trained to recognize that people lose their train of thought and they need to be prompted to eat their meals. And so what was happening was we would be in an activity and the woman would get up and she would wander away and the caregivers would say, "Mary, sit down, sit down." And everybody starts sensing what's going on for that other person and makes them stressed. And one day I said to the caregivers, and let me take a step back. This was an individual that dressed herself. She could dress herself. And in that kind of an environment, when caregivers have somebody that can do for themselves, it's like, okay, great, because I have 10 other people that I have to help. So circling back to what I was saying, I asked the caregiver, "Do me a favor, and lift up her blouse. And they lifted it up, and she had it buttoned, but it was completely unzipped. Because living there, she was eating, she was happy, she was gaining weight, and her clothing didn't fit her anymore. So physically, that was causing her to be a wanderer. So the family were able to know. They brought us elastic waistband pants, and she was comfortable, and we eliminated that behavior. Make changes to make the person more comfortable. So one of the things I think I gravitated toward doing this was that I read Agatha Christie mysteries when I was a kid. And so whodunit is kind of hardwired in me. And when I look at problems, I kind of think about it and I try to solve what's going on. And that's really important that we do that when we're working with somebody who has dementia. Contact the person's doctor about any signs of pain or medical problems. A lot of times people just do not have the capacity to express what's going on for them, and they live with pain. As we age, we all have pain. Trust me, I have pain every day. I'm feeling my age now. But the example I gave with somebody that has a sore mouth and they can't tell, and you're not checking what's going on. Somebody may have a bed sore because they are sitting all day long. They're having skin breakdown. They may have fallen while you weren't around. So it's important to use your doctor. It's really important to recognize a urinary tract infection. And in our hospice work, we're very focused on that. And the nurses say if it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. So if there's a sudden onset of a lot of confusion, if they have a fever, if their urine is overly pungent, if their urine is cloudy, these are all the things that we need to recognize to advocate on behalf of the individual. Help with emotional needs. Think about how the person might be feeling in the situation. Tips to help address the person's feelings. Focus on possible emotions instead of facts of the situation. A lot of times it's just validating how they feel. They may have, well, let's put it this way. A lot of times people were accomplished people. If they had a job, they had to learn how to do all those things to maintain their job. Maybe they were a professional. Maybe the woman was an attorney. She ran a big corporation. And now nobody's asking them for their opinion. Nobody is asking for their help. Everybody is doing for instead of with the individual. So validating how they feel, having the empathy to understand what might be happening. Offer comfort, let them know you are there. You are safe together and you are trying to make them more comfortable. So we'll have examples of a spouse passing away. And the family are thinking, do I tell them that, do I tell dad mom passed away? Well, I feel that it's a good idea to tell that person once. But in the course of having memory loss, they could come up to you every single day and say, where's Edie? Where's Edie? And now they're getting anxious. And anxiety unchecked turns into agitation. And agitation unchecked turns ugly sometimes. So what do we tell that person that's already been told that their husband has passed? They were at the funeral. He's safe. He knows where you are and he loves you. That's just what we did. And it calmed a person down. A person is up and wandering and they're starting to get agitated. Are you hungry? Are you thirsty? Do you need to use the toilet? Helping them emotionally. You're not yelling at them. You're trying to figure it out. Redirect their energy into a more relaxing activity. Find something that gives them joy. So once again, my personal experience has always been to take that energy of sundowning and that angst and all of that and put it into something physical that's safe. So maybe the person is in a wheelchair. It's a really easy thing for somebody who is comfortable at home, had a kitchen, set tables, to fold napkins. It's a really comfortable thing for a man who, let's say he was an engineer, to have papers that he's working on, giving him a newspaper to just look at. He may not be able to read it, but it's a very comforting thing. So you can always channel people into an activity. I created these memory boxes, and we had memory boxes that we used for activities, but we also had memory boxes that we used to de-escalate issues. And there was one woman who made quilts. And she made quilts her whole life. And the daughter gave me a shoebox with all of the pieces of material in the different stages that one would have for a quilt. And we would sit the woman down when she was really anxious, and just looking at those materials was like Bactine. It was just calming for her. And that's, once again, person-centered care. If they don't respond to the things you're trying, let it go, try the approach another time. So you'll have situations where caregivers will go in and attempt to bathe the person, and they're resistant, and they're trained to just walk away and then come back later and try it again and try it again. But we get impatient and we are on a schedule, but we have to be on their schedule. And that's really important to recognize. You have to give time for all of the things and know that they get overstimulated. That's when I keep saying we're the best medicine. Go back to detect and connect. Think about what worked and what didn't. To help plan for the next time, think about what are the warning signs that the behavior may be coming back. What responses work well and what order? When will you need to respond? How can you tell if your approach worked? Who else can help? So if you have a situation where there's two of you, let's say it's siblings taking care of a mom and they're there. Well, in the departments, we had the luxury of having different faces around. And we were all trained where if one caregiver was assisting and it was going south, another caregiver would step in and the one that was getting yelled at would move away. So we always worked as teams. And that was very important. And we always communicated with each other as a team. And a lot of times you'll have people taking care of an individual and they're not really talking to each other about what's going on. So the example that I give of that is that we would have shift change meetings, or I would have monthly meetings with my staff. And you had your first shift, you had second shift, and not shift. And nobody was talking to each other. They were in a busy, they were hurry. They'd leave work, they'd go to another job. So at the meeting, we would say, what's going on? Who's a real problem? And first shift would say, oh, Bill is so difficult. I can't get him to let me change his pull-ups. He fights us. Sometimes he'll bite. And somebody in second shift will say, I don't have a problem with him. He's fine with me. And everybody just looks like, oh my God, what are you talking about? And what I learned from that experience is there's always somebody who gets it. So if family are taking care of somebody, talk to each other. Try to figure it out together and learn from each other. Real life examples of the 4-step approach: anxiety, aggression and anger, suspicion and delusions, getting lost and wandering. So situations that cause anxiety and agitation, moving to a new residence, such as a nursing home or a boarding care or an assisted living, causes in the environment or changes in the environment like travel, hospitalization, or house guests. Very good. Changes in caregiver arrangements, believing that something is a threat, feeling afraid or tired from trying to make sense of the world around them. Eugene is living with dementia. He lives in a quiet apartment with his daughter, Denise. Eugene spends most of his days in his living room doing jigsaw puzzles. Denise's sister and young children visit. The visit is noisy, running around the apartment. Eugene looks anxious, does not want to come out of his room because the environment is very difficult for him. How could Denise detect and connect with Eugene? Try to see the situation from Eugene's perspective. Think about when Eugene's behaviors start. Consider if having noisy young children in the apartment is making him feel anxious. Don't get angry. That doesn't work. In this example, Denise can detect and connect with Eugene by using what she knows about his usual routine and preferences. Aggression, situations that can lead to aggression, physical discomfort, environmental factors, poor communication. Real quick, want to talk about that. Very important. So people that have dementia, it takes a long time for them to process. We have to give them enough time. My sister and brother used to tell me our mom had dementia. And I used to say, she doesn't have dementia. And they'd argue with me. And I said, look, when I talk to my mom, I say it. I give her enough time to think about what I just said. I give her enough time to respond to how she wants to respond. I give her enough time to think about it and not communicate with her like I communicate with my wife and kids, like my sister and brother communicate. We don't even think about it. So we get that person very frustrated. I'm going to stop because these are all kind of the same. Should I ask for questions?
Yeah, I have. Oh, in listening to your program, I don't know if you mentioned how is a person, how do you know they have Alzheimer's? What are the indications of taking a person to a doctor? What tests do they do, et cetera, et cetera?
So the question is, how do you tell if somebody has Alzheimer's, and what are the tests and what are the questions? It's very, very important if you start to see people who are experiencing a change in their behavior, they're forgetful, that you take them to the doctor. And I differentiate between the primary care physician, who I feel are just wonderful from the neck down, and a neurologist or a psychiatrist, because they're going to be able to do a battery of tests to be able to determine not only does the person have dementia, but what kind of dementia do they have. You don't treat somebody with Lewy body like you would treat somebody who has Alzheimer's. So you need to talk to a professional who is involved with the brain. Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
long-term memory. And I don't know, maybe I missed it, but everybody always talks about short-term memory loss, short-term memory loss. Oh, I
Yes.
remember. Could you talk a little bit about why that happens?
Yes.
You mentioned about why the other day happens.
So so once again, once it gets into long-term memory, for the most part, it's there, me remembering my address. The short-term memory is somebody goes up to their father and says, Dad, I'll be here Tuesday at 10 o'clock in the morning to take you to the doctor's appointment. And they tell them on Sunday, and the appointment is on Tuesday. And then they come in and they say, Dad, I told you you had a doctor's appointment. And the example is that information didn't get put into long-term memory. They didn't remember.
Is there a specific cause?
So it's kind of like a device in your car, like a starter. And if you go and your starter doesn't work, then all of the other parts of your engine are not going to function because you didn't start the engine. That's kind of a basic, crude example. But the hippocampus is the device that's charged with the responsibility of creating chemicals in your brain that act and store that in another part of the brain, the long-term memory. So it's the device that gets damaged, a mechanism within your brain that's faulty. And so that's why people, you'll tell them something and 2 seconds later, when are we going? Or somebody will tell you something about them over and over and over because they don't remember that they told you. Yes.
Specific questions because I need to understand it in the here and now with my mother. I'm looking at these 5 A's of Alzheimer's disease and trying to pinpoint this particular action that she's doing. She has no, is not understanding. It's she gets lost in what day it is and doesn't understand when, she knows she has to go somewhere at a particular day, but for those ensuing days, those days between those days, every day is that day.
Yes. So the question is, in telling her mother that there's going to be something, she thinks every day is that day. So the key is less is more. And if she has memory issues and writing it down on a calendar, writing it down on a dry erase board doesn't work, then don't tell her until the day before. Now, if she has a schedule,
Waiting at the door for that appointment.
right, and that's why less is more. And it's okay not to well, so is, but does she believe that she has an appointment for something? So redirecting can take on the form of many things. So redirecting with the Alzheimer's Association, they have a concept called the fiblet. And it's that therapeutic white lie. And there's a lot of people that say, I cannot lie to my mother, and I am not going to lie to my mother. But you're not lying to your mother if she's experiencing a brain disorder that is causing her to have tremendous anxiety. Is it better for her to have all of the behaviors and anxiety that you're describing, or to tell her, oh, Mom, or whoever's with her, I'm so sorry the doctor canceled the appointment. So I had a man every day in the dining room at 5 o'clock used to jump up and he would say to me, I need to talk to you about a business situation. I want to talk to you about an account. And I looked at him and I said, Bill, the day is over. I said, and I don't have the overtime to pay everybody overtime. You see, everybody's off. but I'm going to put it on my calendar and tomorrow we're going to have a meeting. You may think that this is nutso cuckoo, but that's medicine that you're giving people. And nobody knows the individual better than you. So you have to come up with a redirection that works for that individual. And it's Bakhtin. It is solving that problem. But it's important to recognize that no matter how much cognitive behavioral work you do with an individual, there are times when it's biochemical, and a doctor needs to assess whether or not the individual would benefit from a medication that just kind of takes the edge off. So if what you're doing doesn't work, then that's when it's important to consult with your doctor. It's like telling somebody that has depression, be happy. It's sunny out today. It doesn't work.
I think that's all we have time for.
Okay.
If I can have the mic. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I know there's a lot of other questions, but we are out of time for today. But I just want to say, workshopping these things, when you do have a behavior or an issue that you're not sure how to handle, talking to somebody else to get that fresh perspective of ideas of what to say is so beneficial. And honestly, that's what we do here at Senior Concerns. You can always call and speak to one of our social workers or join one of the caregiver support groups as a place to kind of workshop and get input from others. So please reach out if there are other questions or needs that you have. And I want to really thank Mark Seltzer for being with us today. This was super helpful and information. We will email the recording as well as the handouts and the PowerPoint to everybody. So thank you all so much and have a great evening.
What's some of the other seminars that are coming up in the next month or
Ooh,
two?
good question. The next seminar is on scams in April. Oh, and then May is Caregiver Recognition Day. I should have led with that. I'll make sure to have flyers